Leah was sitting in a hospital waiting room, still in her work clothes, when her husband sent her a text message. Not a phone call, a text. "Don't forget we have people coming Friday. The house is a mess, you need to handle that." She had been waiting for 3 hours to hear whether the lump they found in her breast was something to worry about. She read the message twice, then she set the phone face down on the seat beside her and stared at the ceiling until her eyes stopped burning. That was the moment something shifted inside her. Not broke, shifted. Like a door that had been stuck for years finally moving on its hinges. Leah Harmon was 34 years old, and she had spent the last 7 years of her life becoming invisible. It didn't happen all at once. That was the thing nobody warned you about. It happened slowly, the way a room gets dark when the sun goes down. You don't notice the exact moment the light leaves. You just look up one day and realize you can't see your hands in front of your face. She had met Dwayne when she was 26, fresh out of a graduate program in urban planning, working her first real job at a city development firm in Houston. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming, effortlessly, like it cost them nothing. He remembered what she ordered at restaurants. He texted her good morning before she woke up. He told her she was the most interesting woman he had ever met, and she believed him, because back then she had no reason not to. They got married 2 years later. Small ceremony, backyard, her aunt's garden in Beaumont. Leah wore her mother's earrings and cried during her own vows. Not out of sadness, but out of something that felt like relief. She had grown up watching her parents fight and separate and find their way back to each other in patterns that exhausted everyone around them. She wanted something steadier. She thought she had found it. The first year was good. The second year had cracks, but she told herself every marriage had cracks. The third year, Dwayne's contracting business started struggling, and he became someone slightly different. Not dramatically, just tighter around the eyes, quicker to criticize. She would rearrange the furniture, and he would put it back without saying anything, which was somehow worse than if he'd complained. He stopped asking about her work. He started referring to her paycheck as a little extra help, even though by then she was earning more than he was. When she got pregnant with their daughter, Zoe, Dwayne suggested she take a leave of absence, just for the first year, just to get the baby settled. It made sense at the time. She was tired, the firm was demanding, and she genuinely wanted to be present for those early months. The leave became permanent without either of them ever officially deciding that. Leah kept telling herself she would go back. She updated her resume twice and never sent it anywhere. She took on freelance projects that paid almost nothing. She told people at parties that she was doing some consulting work and then changed the subject before anyone could ask follow-up questions. Because the truth was that most days she drove Zoe to school, came home, cleaned a kitchen that would be dirty again by dinner, and waited. Waited for what exactly? She could never quite say. Dwayne's business eventually recovered. More than recovered. By the time Zoe was 4, he had partnered with a commercial real estate investor named Preston, and the two of them were landing contracts that Leah heard about from other people at church before Dwayne ever mentioned them at home. He started staying late. Then some nights he would text that he and Preston were meeting with clients and she shouldn't wait up. She didn't ask questions, because somewhere along the way she had learned that asking questions made her the problem. There were small things she noticed and filed away, and tried not to think about too hard. A receipt she found in a jacket pocket for a restaurant she had never been to. The way he laughed differently on the phone sometimes, softer than his regular laugh, like he was trying not to be heard. The fact that he had started buying better cologne. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself she was lonely and bored, and looking for reasons to explain why her marriage felt like a house with the heat turned off. Zoe was 6 when Leah felt the lump. She was in the shower, and her hand just stopped. She stood there for a long moment with the water running over her shoulders, not moving. Then she finished her shower, dried off, got Zoe ready for school, packed her lunch, and drove her to drop off without saying a word about it to anyone. She made the appointment herself. She went to the first consultation alone. When the doctor recommended a biopsy, she scheduled it for a Tuesday, because Zoe had swimming on Mondays and Thursdays, and Leah didn't want to disrupt the schedule. She told Dwayne the night before. They were in the kitchen. He was standing at the counter scrolling through something on his phone, and she said quietly that she was going in for a biopsy tomorrow morning. He looked up, said he hoped it would come back fine, asked if she needed him to drop Zoe at school. She said no, she had it covered. That was the whole conversation. The waiting room at the imaging center had beige walls and a television mounted in the corner, playing a morning talk show with the volume too low to understand the words. Leah sat in a chair near the window and watched a woman across from her hold her husband's hands so tightly that his knuckles went white. He kept leaning over and saying something in her ear, and every time he did, she would close her eyes and nod slowly, like she was absorbing something she needed. Leah watched them for a long time. Then her phone buzzed with Dwayne's text about the house, and something inside her made a quiet final sound, like a key turning in a lock. The results came back 3 days later. Benign. The doctor sat across from her and said the word, like it was a gift, which it was. She understood that completely, but she drove home from that appointment and sat in the parking lot of a grocery store for 20 minutes and couldn't stop shaking. Not because she had been scared of cancer. She had been scared, yes. But what kept running through her mind wasn't the lump or the biopsy or the benign result. It was the fact that she had sat in that waiting room alone, not because she had to. Because she had stopped expecting anything different. She bought herself a coffee inside the grocery store. She sat at one of the little tables near the window and drank it slowly and watched people push carts past the sliding glass doors in the afternoon light. An older woman in a yellow cardigan stopped near the entrance to help a child who had dropped something. The child looked up at her with such uncomplicated gratitude that Leah had to look away. When had she stopped expecting anyone to stop for her? She thought about her mother, Ruth Ann, who lived in Beaumont and called every Sunday and was the most practical woman Leah had ever known. Ruth Ann had raised Leah and her brother mostly alone, after their father drifted in and out of their lives with the reliability of bad weather. She had worked as a bookkeeper for the same accounting firm for 23 years. She had never complained. She had also, Leah realized now, never seemed particularly happy. Once, when Leah was in high school, she had asked her mother why she didn't date. Ruth Ann had looked at her for a moment and said very simply, "I'm too tired to teach another grown man how to treat me." Leah had laughed at the time. She didn't think it was funny anymore. She drove home. She folded a load of laundry. She picked up Zoe from school and listened to her daughter describe, in extraordinary detail, a disagreement that had occurred at recess involving a jump rope and someone named Bethany. Leah listened to every word and asked follow-up questions and helped Zoe navigate the situation with all the care and attention she could give. Because Zoe deserved that care. Zoe had always deserved every bit of it. That night after Zoe was asleep, Leah sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and waited for Dwayne to come home. It was past 11 when he did. He smelled like a restaurant she didn't recognize. He said the client meeting had run long. He didn't ask about the biopsy results. She had already decided not to tell him that night. She wanted to see if he would ask. He didn't. He went upstairs. She heard the shower running. She sat at the table until the house was quiet, and then she opened her laptop and started reading. She wasn't sure exactly what she was looking for, but she started with her own finances, which she hadn't looked at closely in years. Their joint account. The separate account Dwayne used for business expenses. The mortgage. The savings. What was in her name versus his name versus both. She went slowly, methodically, the way she used to approach projects at work back when she was someone who had projects. She found things she hadn't known to look for. A credit card in Dwayne's name that she hadn't known about, with charges to restaurants and hotels that she recognized the pattern of even if she couldn't yet put a name to it. A withdrawal from their savings account 6 months ago, $10,000, that she had no memory of discussing. She closed the laptop. She finished her water. She sat in the quiet kitchen of the house she had kept running for 7 years and allowed herself for the first time to see things clearly. It wasn't rage she felt. It was something colder and more useful than rage. It was the feeling of finally knowing the shape of a problem after you've been bumping into it in the dark for years. She called her mother the next morning after Zoe was at school. Ruth Ann picked up on the second ring, as she always did. Leah had planned to ease into it, but what she actually said within the first 30 seconds was, "Mom, I think I need to leave my marriage." There was a pause on the other end. Then Ruth Ann said, "Tell me what happened." Leah told her, not everything, not all at once, but enough. She told her about the biopsy and sitting alone in the waiting room and the text message about the house. She told her about the credit card and the hotel charges and the restaurant she'd never been to. She told her about the years of freelance work she'd never really pursued and the resume she'd updated twice and never sent. Ruth Ann listened without interrupting. When Leah finished, her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Leah had not expected. "I always thought you were the brave one." Leah didn't know what to say. "I stayed," Ruth Ann said, "in all kinds of situations because I was afraid of what people would say. Afraid of what your grandmother would say, Afraid of being alone. I convinced myself that was wisdom. She paused. It wasn't. After she hung up, Leah sat in the kitchen and looked out the window at the backyard, where Zoe liked to chase the neighbor's cat along the fence line. There was a bird feeder out there that she had put up 2 summers ago, and Dwayne had never once commented on, either to say he liked it or to say he didn't. It had just become part of the background of the house, like everything she did. She was not going to be part of the background anymore. She called a lawyer that afternoon, not to file immediately, just to understand her options. The lawyer, a direct woman named Powell with a small office near the Galleria, walked her through the basics without drama. Texas community property laws, what her years out of the workforce might mean for the settlement, how to document what she'd found before she said anything to Dwayne. Leah took notes. She had always been good at taking notes. Over the following 2 weeks, she moved carefully. She made copies of financial documents. She opened a personal checking account at a different bank. She called the urban planning firm where she used to work and spoke to a former colleague named James, who told her, without hesitation, that if she wanted to come back into the field, there were people who would be interested in talking to her. She cried after that phone call, not because she was sad, because she had forgotten that she was someone people might want. She also started watching Dwayne differently, not with anger, with clarity. She noticed things she had trained herself not to notice. The way he looked at his phone and angled the screen away from her without realizing he did it. The way he praised Zoe effusively when there were other people in the room, but barely registered her on ordinary evenings. The way he had slowly, over years, rearranged the house to suit himself, while somehow making Leah feel that any objection she raised was an imposition. One evening she was in the kitchen making dinner when Dwayne came home earlier than usual. He was in a good mood, which happened sometimes, and which she had learned not to trust. He stood at the counter and watched her cook and said, with the easy confidence of a man who had never questioned his welcome, "You know, you're actually pretty good at this." She kept stirring. "Good at what? This?" He gestured vaguely at the kitchen. "Taking care of things. Some women aren't." She didn't respond. She put the food on the table and called Zoe for dinner, and watched her daughter chatter about her day while Dwayne nodded along without absorbing any of it, and she thought, "My daughter is watching me. My daughter is watching every single thing I do and deciding what's normal." That thought stayed with her longer than anything else. Zoe was 6 years old. She was funny and curious, and she asked questions about everything, and she had a habit of narrating her own actions in a quiet voice while she was concentrating on something, which Leah found unbearably endearing. Zoe deserved a mother who had not erased herself. Zoe deserved to see what it looked like when a woman decided she was worth something. 3 weeks after the biopsy, on a Thursday evening, Leah waited until Zoe was in bed. Then she went downstairs and sat across from Dwayne in the living room and told him she knew about the credit card. He denied it for about 4 minutes. Then he stopped denying it and became very still. "How long?" she asked. He told her 14 months. She nodded. She had suspected longer, but she didn't say that. "I want a divorce," she said. "I'm not asking for your opinion on whether that's the right decision. I'm telling you what's going to happen." She expected anger. She had prepared for anger. What she got instead was something more deflating. He looked at her for a long moment and then said, "Leah, you don't have anywhere to go." She heard what he meant by that. No job, no income of her own, no plan. He had watched her shrink for 7 years, and he had come to believe, in the way that people believe things they find convenient, that the shrinking was simply who she was. "I'll figure it out," she said. "The house is in both our names." "I know, Zoe's school. I know, Dwayne." He fell quiet. She could see him recalibrating, searching for the angle, the argument that would make her feel small enough to back down. "What are you going to do?" he asked finally, and the way he said it was not a question. It was a reminder of everything she didn't have. She looked at him steadily. "What I should have done 3 years ago." The divorce took 8 months. It was not easy, and she had not expected it to be. Dwayne hired an attorney who was aggressive and strategic, and there were weeks when Leah went to bed with her jaw so tight she woke up with headaches. She learned things about negotiation that she had never wanted to know. She learned how to hold her position in a room full of people who were trying to wear her down. Her mother came and stayed for 6 weeks. Ruth Ann cleaned and cooked and took Zoe to school on the mornings when Leah had early calls with her attorney. And she did all of it without making Leah feel like she was being rescued. She did it the way you do things for someone you believe in. Leah took the job interview James had mentioned. It was not a sure thing. The firm was small, the work was demanding, and she was returning to a field she had been away from for 7 years. The interview was uncomfortable in the way that honest things sometimes are. She sat across from two people who asked her pointed questions about the gap in her employment history, and she answered them directly, without apology, and said that she was ready to work at whatever pace was required to prove that she still had something to offer. They called her back 10 days later. She started 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. The first morning she dropped Zoe at school and then drove to her new office and sat in her car in the parking garage for a few minutes before going in. Not because she was afraid. She sat there because she wanted to mark the moment. She wanted to notice it passing. The office was small and the coffee machine was unreliable, and she had to relearn things she had once known without thinking. But she was good at the work. She had always been good at the work. She had just forgotten. Zoe adjusted better than Leah had feared. Children are more resilient than the adults around them give them credit for, and they are also, Leah came to understand, more perceptive. Zoe knew something had shifted long before anyone explained it to her, and by the time Leah sat down and told her, as honestly as she could for a 6-year-old, that she and Daddy were going to live in different places, Zoe had nodded with the focused seriousness of a person who had been doing her own quiet calculations. "Will I still go to the same school?" she asked. "Yes. Will my room be the same? I'll make sure of it." Zoe considered this. Then she said, "Okay," and asked if they could have grilled cheese for dinner. Leah said yes. She made the grilled cheese. She sat across from her daughter at the small table in their new apartment and watched Zoe eat with the unself-conscious satisfaction of a child who trusts that her needs will be met, and something in Leah's chest unwound just slightly. Dwayne remarried 2 years later. Leah heard it through mutual friends before he told Zoe, which was typical of him. She processed that news in the parking lot of a grocery store, which seemed to be becoming the place where she handled things she hadn't planned for. And then she went inside and bought the ingredients for Zoe's birthday cake and drove home. She did not spend much time thinking about whether he was happy. She spent her time on her daughter and her work, and the slow project of becoming someone she recognized again. There were hard nights. She would be dishonest if she pretended otherwise. Nights when Zoe was at Dwayne's, and the apartment was very quiet, and the silence had a weight to it that she had not learned to be comfortable with yet. Nights when she wondered if she had waited too long, or not long enough, or if the whole shape of her life had been altered in ways she wouldn't understand for years. On one of those nights, she called her mother. Not to be talked down, just to hear Ruth Ann's voice. Her mother answered on the second ring, as she always did. "How are you doing?" Ruth Ann asked. Leah looked around the apartment, at the shelves she had filled with books she actually wanted to read, at the print she had hung on the wall because she liked it, and for no other reason, at the bird feeder she had brought from the old house and installed outside the window, because Zoe liked birds, and because Leah had decided she liked birds too. "I'm okay," she said. And then with some surprise, "I'm actually okay." There was a pause on the other end. Then Ruth Ann said quietly, "Good." They stayed on the line for a while without saying much. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Outside Leah's window, the city hummed at its usual pitch, indifferent and constant, and the bird feeder swung gently on its hook in the evening breeze, and Leah sat in her own apartment in her own life and breathed. She had chosen the pain that happened only once. The scars were there. She could feel them when she was tired, or when Zoe looked up at her a certain way, and she caught a glimpse of who her daughter was becoming. Steady and frank and unafraid to ask for what she needed. That was what she had given her. Not a perfect life. Not a painless one, but a true one, and that, finally, was enough.